Welcome back to Lush Life, No Labels, a podcast where I talk about the struggles and joys of self improvement, anywhere from relationships, career, wellness, and more. I'm Fatu. Have you ever gone somewhere and come back a little different? My story of the week this week is on the recent vacation that I took. It was a domestic vacation within the US, and I really enjoyed my time. I was able to learn some history, walk through the only rainforests in the US territories. I also did a traditional Afro Bumba class on the beach at sunset. It was absolutely beautiful. I had some good food and great company. Actually, fun fact about me, the first big travel I did in my life was moving from Guinea Conakry in West Africa to America, which is crazy to think about now that I'm sitting where I am. At that time, I knew absolutely nothing about this country and I didn't even speak English. One thing about me, though, I do love to travel, and I've traveled domestically, internationally, and even within my city. My love for travel, I'd say, is in my blood. My parents traveled a lot in their lives as well. My mother was a flight attendant for over 10 years, and my father lived in several different countries and spoke at least 8 languages. So I think their love of travel kind of moved down to me, which is nice. I want to talk about travel today because obviously I just came back from a vacation, but I thought about how as adults, it's really easy to get stuck in a routine. We go to work 9 to 5, most of us, some of us are entrepreneurs, and oftentimes as adults, it seems like our lives are literally working in some capacity, coming home, making dinner, sleeping, doing it all over again. Obviously, some folks have hobbies, which I've talked about in a previous episode, and folks have kids as well, which can take up a lot of time. But traveling can interrupt those normal life routines because we're doing other things for at least a few days, usually staying somewhere that's not our home that we are used to. I'm not sure if this happens to you, but sometimes fear, anxiety, or guilt can come to us if we decide to take some time away, especially if we work somewhere where it's hard to take time off because of our workload or we don't get as much PTO. When I used to work in management consulting, my vacations were never actual vacations. I'd take my phone and my computer with me and would check my email, respond to emails, and even do some work because of the sense of urgency in that space. If you know, you know about consulting. Maybe I'll talk about that one day. But that was the worst for me. And when I traveled with friends, they'd get mad at me, rightfully so, for not being unplugged and not really participating in a lot of different things. I would feel guilty, but I couldn't blame them because they were right. It just felt like I was wasting my vacation time. So during those years, I never really got time off. If you are a supervisor, a senior leader, or even an entrepreneur running your own business, you probably feel that you can't take time off. And if you do, you're always checking your email. I say this because I've had managers and bosses who literally took the entire week off, but then they were actually online in meetings and basically doing work the entire time and couldn't spend time with their family, which I think is pretty sad and unfortunate. I am not a parent, but I've heard and seen parents on vacation with their kids, mostly taking care of them, or like I said, with some of my managers, actually also doing work. It's important to take time off, of course, but it can be difficult if you feel like you need to do work. On the other end, obviously, parents with young children need to care for their children. That is the priority. But that could be another reason that a vacation can seem daunting or there can be guilt of that because if you're focusing your entire time on taking care of your kids, then you yourself may not have time to relax. No matter your situation, overall, travel can be difficult because it requires us to step out of our comfort zone and leave that routine. Travel is hard. I think we all know that. And that's not even bringing in the financial cost into it when you include transportation, hotel stay, meals, or excursions. I understand not everyone can do international travel or even travel across the country for various reasons, but there are other options that I'll talk about a bit later in terms of staycations, if you've ever heard that term. The common types of travel we do are often domestic or international, but not everyone can do one of those types of trips for different reasons. That's why staycations are another alternative type of vacation. No matter where I go in my travel, one of the most important things is exploring. I like to explore new restaurants, new neighborhoods, new cultures. There are many reasons to be traveling. Some trips I take simply to relax or hang out with friends and family. I've also done solo trips, which have honestly shown me a lot about myself. And of course, I mentioned finances earlier, which is a big part of having the ability to travel. But I say all of that to say that there are many different types of travel that one can do, even if you have the challenges that I talked about earlier at the beginning of this episode. Despite the challenges of travel, to me, travel is more than a vacation, and there are a lot of benefits that I've had from it, which keeps me going and keeps me wanting to do it. One, it allows me to immerse myself wherever I'm going. I mentioned earlier how when I worked in consulting, it really did not allow me to take the proper time off mentally or even physically as I was typing on my computer. As part of my self growth, one thing I told myself after leaving consulting was when I take time off or even take a vacation to travel somewhere, that is what I will do. I have been building so many boundaries, it's not even funny. I delegate and make sure people have what they need from me at the workplace before I go because they really should not expect to hear from me. And again, that could be just the position that I'm in, that I'm able to do it. But I've had friends who legit are in higher positions managing other people who have been able to make those boundaries, make it very clear, and take time off. So I do think that workplace aspect depends on who your employer is and who you work with on a team. I also find that when I'm away, I really do try to be present where I am and have a mental rest. If there's something that I need to address at home, obviously I will address that. But if it's not something that is an emergency, then I really do try to be where I am and enjoy that time. I love a trip where I learn about history, eat good food, meet some people, and walk around a lot. Another benefit for me on travel is that it really expands my worldview. I am able to gain certain perspectives, whether about the place that I'm visiting or about myself. And more importantly, it allows me to step outside of my comfort zone because our comfort zone is where we live in that routine of our 9 to 5 or whatever we're doing every single day. So even if you do a staycation and stay in your city, you're still stepping out of your comfort zone because you may be exploring another part of the city that you are not as familiar with. Oh, I may have forgotten to define a staycation earlier, but a staycation is essentially a vacation that you do within your town or within your city. So maybe you rent a hotel room across town or near where you live and you stay there and you do different things in your city, kind of like a tourist within your own city. That has been growing more and more over time. I've seen a lot more people doing those things because frankly, it has become more and more expensive to travel. So people are finding alternative ways to do it, which I think is great. I've had a lot of personal growth with navigating new places. I have traveled a lot with friends, which is great because you get to do different activities with your friends, get to know them better. And that can certainly teach you more about yourself and teach you more about your friends, and also teach you about communication and teamwork. Because if you've ever been on a group trip with especially at least 3 or 4 people, you have to really communicate with the people that you're going with in terms of coordinating when you're going to get there, where are you going to stay, what excursions you're going to do, where you're going to eat. Sometimes people don't always align on some of those things, and it can be difficult. So part of the growth with group trips is really learning to work together with other people and understand, okay, we're going to do these things together, but I'm just going to take a break in the afternoon and you guys can go and do XYZ. So it's important that everyone gets their own travel in there and they can choose what they want. But I understand that sometimes that can be difficult when you're in a group. When I've traveled solo, I've dealt with uncertainty and have felt lonely at times because I've been by myself, which can be hard. But honestly, all of that has strengthened my confidence in myself because it challenges me to take the reins and rely on myself for the most part. Some of these challenges have helped me build more resilience and adaptability. For example, my first international solo trip was to Portugal, where they, of course, speak Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese. French is the closest thing I speak to Portuguese. And although there were some language barriers, I managed to learn some key phrases before I went there. And I was very nervous before this trip because, like I said, it was the first time that it was me, myself, and I in a completely new, different country. So I had to navigate the travel system, the language, everything else around that. But it was one of the most fulfilling trips I've had because I was on my own time, which is different when you're in a group. I allowed myself to be present with myself because I'm the only one there. It's not like there are people for me to have conversations with outside of the other people that I meet. But I really enjoyed not only meeting Portuguese people, but also other travelers from around the world on the different excursions that I did. And you really learn a lot about people who are also traveling. You learn about their lives, why they're there, and it can be pretty good to learn those types of things. I want to highlight this specifically because I know some people travel to other places and may only stay at a resort. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I am the type to explore outside of that. Like I said, meeting new people, doing different excursions, trying to speak a little bit of the language as much as I can. Even if you're traveling domestically in the US, which I've done with friends and alone, the US is a huge country. There are so many different geographies, so many different types of people that live in this country. It is called the melting pot for a reason, even though some people may not agree with that. And there's a lot of beauty in the US as well. And I think sometimes people forget that. There's so much clarity that can come from your travels, whether you stay in your city, go somewhere in the US, or go internationally. You might discover new goals that you have, maybe new career paths, or even things about yourself that you didn't know before while going through some of these challenges. Let's say you travel and come back home. Sometimes you can have the blues because now you're back to that routine in your life, or you got to get back to work. Frankly, this has happened to me many times, especially if I travel in the winters of New England to somewhere way warmer and come back to the darkness of winter. That feeling can suck. But I've tried to figure out different ways as part of this self-growth journey to overcome that. The biggest thing I've actually started doing is changing my mindset. If you've listened to my other episodes, I talk about changing mindset a lot because I do think that's one of the very first steps, no matter what it is that you are trying to grow in, whether it's a skill, whether it's doing something else with your life, whether it's improving your relationships. I believe changing the mindset is always the first step because if you don't change your mindset, then you're not going to make the goals to get to where you want to be and then actually do the actions to get to where you want to be. One thing I've started doing is thinking of travel not as an escape from my routine life, but more as enrichment, because that way it seems less temporary. I see it as an extension of the life that I'm already living, and reframing it as enrichment helps me be more reflective about my trips, and I see it as part of my self-improvement toolkit. To me, travel is just one of the many ways that I can grow. Even if you don't purposefully reflect, I can guarantee you've definitely learned something from your travels. For example, I talked about how I needed to communicate with either my friends who I travel with or people in other countries or other areas throughout my time there. When I travel with friends, I know them, of course, before the vacation, but sometimes you don't know how people travel or how they really are when you're with them somewhere else. And so that's a big thing, really doing that key communication. If I travel to another country, of course, I need to know how to communicate with people. Like I said, during my Portuguese trip, I didn't all of a sudden learn the language, but I had to find a way to adapt and communicate in different ways with people. Whether that was using Google Translate, learning some key phrases. Even if I learned nothing else from my trip, I did have some self growth and I was challenged by actively having to communicate in these ways. That in itself is part of my journey. Like I said, this is a self improvement podcast, so I encourage you next time you think about traveling or doing a staycation, try and reflect or reframe your mindset about what you're doing. Even though I travel each year, I still have travel fails. I've made these mistakes, so you don't have to. You can judge me on them, but sometimes things just happen. One tip I have, I literally lost my ID on the plane one time, and I didn't notice until I had landed at my destination. That was a bit stressful because I didn't know how I was going to get back. Y'all, old me would have freaked out. But luckily, this was a domestic flight and not international because that probably would have been worse. And I really needed that vacation at the time. So mentally, even though I did lose my ID and that was a concern of mine, my mindset was, well, mentally, it's above me now. I don't have it. I'm already here. I'm not going to be able to go back right now anyways. So I'm just going to enjoy my time and figure it out later. I ended up checking the TSA website and found out that they have a specific process to identify people who don't have proper identification. It took a little bit longer, but I did do my research and I figured it out. So my very first tip is to make sure you have all of your documents in order and ideally travel with more than one form of identification just in case. That's certainly what I have been doing since I lost my ID. Another thing too is to carry some cash. This is something I didn't really used to do before. If you're traveling in the US, you're probably fine, but it's always good to carry at least a little bit of something. If you're traveling internationally, some banks will give you cash for the country that you're visiting. If they don't, I recommend taking out cash in the US and exchanging it when you get there because that's going to save you the most money. Don't exchange it at the airport. I've made that mistake before. Yes, while it's the most convenient thing, the exchange rates are much higher. And there are almost always many places in town that have better exchange rates. I also know many people travel and want to do a bunch of activities, which is great. But I'd suggest leaving yourself some time to lounge around. Ultimately, you are traveling for a reason and you did take time off. So take some downtime. It's the worst feeling to come back from vacation and not feel well rested before going back to work, either because you were doing so many activities you didn't even have time to sleep, or because you mentally were not relaxed and now you have to come back and pick up all that mental load that you wanted to leave behind for a few days. I even started leaving at least one day from when I get back from vacation to when I go back to work as a reset. Of course, you would need to take more vacation time for that, and I know that's not feasible for everyone, but if you do have this option, I really recommend taking that. If you travel somewhere where you don't speak the language, honestly, try not to be that one person who just tries to speak English to everyone because, I don't know, I find that annoying personally. Always learn a few phrases from that area. Things like, hello, how are you? Goodbye. Any items you might be allergic to. That just helps communicate better with people. And of course, we have translation apps like Google and other translation apps that you can use to communicate. But if you're especially going somewhere where you don't speak the language, put in some effort at least. You're visiting their country, not the other way around. The other thing too, along with that, is just download offline maps. It can help you if you're running out of battery or if there's not Wi-Fi where you are. My final tip here is have fun and be open. Don't just travel to stay inside your hotel room. Like I said, you can even do a staycation that is cheaper in your city, or you can stay at home and just do some excursions in your city and be a tourist. There are so many different ways you can travel that can also not cost a lot of money. So go out and explore because life is for the living. Travel can be uncomfortable, like I said earlier, but honestly, growth happens when we are out of our comfort zone and when we are challenged. And there are so many joys that can happen in unexpected moments. I'll leave it there for now. I'll certainly have more episodes talking about travel. But one question I want to leave you with is, where would you go if you were chasing growth, not escape? Thanks for listening to another episode of Lush Life, No Labels. Like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Y'all leave me some comments as well about what you think about these episodes and if you have any questions that you want me to answer. Cheers to your lush life and see you later.